Welcome to Modernizing Old Hymns. One of the things I've been working on lately is I've been trying to make a book of some easy to play hymns for a variety of instruments. And I came across one hymn, Built on a Rock, the Church Doth Stand. And I could tell right away it was one of the favorites of the authors of the Lutheran Hymnal of 1941. Why? Because it was so complicated. Now, this hymn really, the melody is not complicated. The melody is in Dorian, D Dorian. They wrote it up in D flat. Why? Because they wanted to make the background more complicated. First thing you saw when you turned this video on is I made a much more simpler application of it. So I thought, as long as I'm going to teach you a simple version of the hymn, why can't I teach you ways to make it even more simple? Techniques you can apply to a lot of different hymns. So what we're going to do here, again, if you'd like a copy for yourself to follow along, there's a link down below in the description, and you can run off a copy of the hymn for yourself. Right now I'm going to do what I call the guitar version. And again, if you play other instruments other than the guitar, please stay tuned. You may learn tricks that will help you along. So there's well, let me just get started here. Okay, see, if we play this pattern, just boom, chick, melodies down on the low strings, you have to add a C to the A minor chord instead of the A. It's really not too hard to do, but maybe you're not ready for it yet. That's okay. All right. If you've seen my numbered lessons, you should know that there's another chord that's very similar to the A minor chord, and it does have a C bass in it. That's the C major chord. Two of the three notes in the chord are the same. So if we play a C major chord there, it's easier to play and it sounds almost the same. So I wrote up the guitar version here, and you can see where there's a C note, I wrote a red C above it. Here we've got the A note again, so we'll leave that as an A minor, and then back to the C. And there's one more down here, wrote a C over it. The next two lines repeat. Then there's two more. Okay, C notes here, so I wrote red C's above that. Another problem you might have is there's an F sharp right here. Now, if you're playing the D chord already, you might be able to reach over with your little finger and fourth fret, fourth string, catch that in. I think most guitar players prefer to play it as a bar chord. Still kind of hard. One thing you can do is you can also reach it from the A minor chord, which is just before this one. Still can't make the stretch. I think people with smaller hands might not be able to do it. Don't let that stop you. Okay. Easiest thing to do of all? Just play it by itself. Yeah. So let me run through it here. And this is our pattern. chord, A minor, C, F sharp by itself, whole thing repeats. F sharp by itself again. G chord, now that F sharp by itself again. F sharp by itself again. C chord again. Now, in the hymnal, this is in D Dorian. If you've seen the sheet music, it says A Dorian. I lowered it quite a bit. And one of their favorite hymns, so they made it really high. It goes up to that high F, which really most people cannot sing. One of the reasons I dropped this to A Dorian is because recently there was a report that came out from a Baptist group called Renewing Worship. They tackled the problem. What is the easiest range for just the average person to sing in? And not surprisingly, it's middle C to shining C. Yeah, those 8 notes are really the perfect range, and most other people can go 1 note higher and 2 notes lower, according to them. So if you look at the music, you see the very last note, it goes down to an A. Okay, that's about the limit, but it's okay. And highest note is a C. That's perfect. Okay, so one of the reasons I'm doing this, and I'll try to keep that in mind in the future too. Let's face it, the hymnal is 4-part harmony. The high notes are for sopranos, people who can sing a little higher than average. For unison singing, this arrangement should be pretty good. So now I'm going to use a finger pick. And on the quarter notes, single beat notes, I'll use the index on a string above that to get, you know, that counter melody in there. If I come to a double beat note, the first one is a C. See a little different pattern there. Thumb on the melody, index, middle, index. When I come to a triple length note, thumb, index, middle, index, middle, index. Okay, let's give it a try here, and I'll be using that guitar version with the red C's in it. C chord. As the melody note goes up, the other 2 fingers go up 1 string with it. F sharp by itself. Those 2 lines repeat, and F sharp by itself. Now that B is on the second string already, so we're running out of strings for the fingers. You can either double up on that B, thumb and index on the same string, or what I did now is I just faked it and continuing. Okay, now I'm going to use a technique I've often used in this series, is strum up to the melody note. Now if you're only going to strum up to the bass note, it's which works. But let's see if we can work a few more strings in there. This time I'm going to play it an octave higher. And you'll find out when we play an octave higher, we don't need those red chords I wrote in there anymore. The F sharp is already at the top of the D chord, so that's what we'll be using. One thing you got to remember is when we've got to play a G chord with a D on the top. Normally there's a G on the top. If you just take your little finger and move that one string over and don't play the top string. Stop on the second string. There we've got our D note on the G chord. And one thing we're going to have to do then, since we're playing this an octave higher, is we're going to have to work our way up the neck. And that usually means bar chords. But I'll see if I can talk you around those, okay? Let's get started here. Now, the melody note is on the third string. So when we play the A chord, we want to stop on that third string. And then right after that, we'll go up to the highest string. Again, there's the C on the second string. G with the D on it. Okay, that line repeats again. And starting at the fifth line again, A minor. Oh, now here our melody note is way up there. Play a bar chord? If you're able to. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quick play that one by itself. So we end on the A minor chord and then and now here it really goes up high. We get the highest note here. Now again, people would say, oh, take a bar chord and move it way up here. How about if we only play just 3 strings? Then we don't need a bar chord, 3 or 4 strings. Now so if I play that A, I get the E in there real quick, go up to the 5th fret, and then to the 8th. And then we got to work in that pretty E minor chord. If you're playing it with just 3 fingers, it's 1 finger at the 7th fret there, a string above that, and a fret above that, string above that, and a fret above that. And that'll be our E minor chord. If you check it over carefully, we're starting down here on what would be just the top 3 strings of the A minor chord, and then pretending your finger is off the grid here. Then so do bar chords with just 3 fingers. So it can save you a sprained muscle, okay? So again, I'll start with that high E. And that A by itself again. Here I'm going to play a G chord to get that high note. Let me do the whole thing in rhythm here. G chord, D, and then the last line. There we go. No spring fingers. Now, if you're playing a diatonic instrument, an instrument that doesn't have sharps or flats, don't let that stop you either. Okay, I've got one right here. Now this song is in Dorian, so there's just one thing you got to remember, and that's capo at the 1st fret. Okay, then you can play in Dorian. No sharps or flats needed. This instrument is tuned to G, so capoing it on the 1st fret, I'm playing in A Dorian. Normally I do D, A, D. I've got a D, G, D to do it down to the key of G. And, well, let's get started here. Those 2 lines repeat, and something like that. No sharps or flats needed. Now, if you're playing this on a banjo, or in this case a banjola, there might be a little bit of a dilemma here too. The song is in A Dorian, so normally, if you're playing in A minor, you'd think, I want that 5th string, the short string, on A, not G like it normally is. Actually, this is in A Dorian. A Dorian is in the key of G. Instead of trying to switch over quick back and forth, because the 5th line goes in the key of C, and so A on the C chord doesn't sound so good either. But actually in Dorian, I usually let that string ring. In A Dorian here, just let it ring on G. Somehow it's in your head, believe it or not, that this is in the key of G. And it really doesn't sound that bad. And when we get to that 5th line, it kind of resolves. It fits in with the key of C, and it's like a breath of fresh air. The one thing is, might sound sour there. I usually keep right on going with the G, but if you're worried about it, just don't play the 5th string on that one chord. Perhaps I should mention too, before I get started, that it's amazing what you can get by with in some of these modal scales, so don't be afraid. Other thing too is if you, that's playing it with an E chord, that's an E7th chord. The E7th chord doesn't sound quite as bad, but again, if you're worried about it, don't play that fifth string on it. On an instrument with fewer strings, it's easier to work your way up the neck, and we will definitely have to do that with this one. Getting to that really high line, the seventh line there. My A minor, I can play it up here. Excuse me there. Bar at the fifth string. Just, I'm moving the E minor chord up there. And then what I did is another movable chord, a chord that uses all four strings. So if you slide it up, there's no other barring necessary. This is the D minor chord if I move it all the way up to here. Oh, let's see, that would be the 9th fret. I get those 3 notes right in a row. And then if you play an A minor, just 1 fret below that. And then there's the G. It's supposed to be an E minor chord. I just play that high G on a G chord, close enough. And back to the E7th. So this is how it goes. And if you're worried about that string sounding a little sour, maybe give it a little intro. Let people get that into their heads. And then I don't think that E chord doesn't sound so bad, but you do what you want. And then here comes that really high part. She doesn't sound too bad, really, does it? Okay, here's another seeming dilemma here. Now, in the hymnal, it's in D Dorian, which is in the key of C. And it says most kalimbas are in the key of C. So I can play it like that on here, but then there's that high F note to worry about. A lot of people can't hit that. If you want somebody to sing along, play it in a more comfortable key, we can drop it to the key of G. Now, the problem is, of course, that whereas the key of C has an F natural in it, the key of G has an F sharp in it. And playing things that are just 1/2 step off like that can really sound sour. So what can we do here? Well, I have a kind of a pattern that I use to get around this problem. We'll play it in the key of G. A Dorian, as I've got it written up here, is in the key of G. But what are we going to do with those F sharp? Another problem we have is if you play chords, the kalimba has a D minor chord on it, but not a D major chord like we need. So I've got a kind of a formula here to convert songs from C to the key of G for the kalimba and other diatonic instruments that don't have sharps or flats in them. If you look at the sheet here, well, first of all, I'll tell you, part of my pattern is if I see an A note on a D chord, then I play an A minor instead. Play the A on the A minor. If you're not playing chords, that's nothing to worry about. But again, we've got that pesky F sharp especially. If I see an F sharp or a D on a D chord, then I play a D note instead. And if you're playing the chord, you want to play that on a G chord. That way we don't have to play the D chord, D major chord, or the F sharp at all. So I'll play it along here, and where I've written the red notes here is where we had F sharps on a D chord. Instead, I will be playing a D note there. Yeah, it sounds a little bit different, but one of the reasons I pick these notes are that it'll harmonize. If somebody else is singing along on the F sharp, that D note will harmonize with it. Well, let's give it a try here. That was an A minor chord. A minor again. Here's a D note. And then those two lines repeat again. And I'll go to the fifth line here. There's the D note. C major chord there. Okay, and now to the sixth line. An E minor chord there. I'm using just those three chords here: A minor, E minor, and C major. And E minor again. And there's the D. Okay, now what did we do here? There's one note of the scale that's peskier than all the rest. It's the second to the last note as you're going up the scale. In the key of G, as we just saw, the second to the last note going up the scale is the F sharp. We got rid of the F sharp. Now, this is not just some hypothetical nonsense here. The 7-note scale is called the hexatonic scale. And there have been fiddle tunes and things like that that are composed in this hexatonic scale. If you're transposing music or writing your own music for a diatonic instrument, you might consider using that 7-note scale. And then if for some reason you have to convert to a different scale from C to G, it's not too hard to do that way. Of course, it's not going to work for everything, but it sounded pretty good on the hymn we just did. I think most people probably wouldn't even notice that one note difference. If somebody does notice it, I think they're most likely to say, "Oh, that was a beautiful variation of that song." If you get somebody who says, "Hey, I think you got a note wrong in there," you can just tell them, "In order to play the song on my instrument, I had to convert it to the hexatonic scale." And that'll probably shut them right up. Maybe I'm doing a disservice here by saying we simplified the hymn. Let's face it, what sounds good on an organ doesn't sound good on a guitar. What sounds good on a piano doesn't sound good on a kalimba. There's different styles of playing for different instruments. There's different expertise that goes into different instruments. So there are many classical guitar songs out there. Yeah, I'm talking about songs made for the guitar and classical music that a lot of them don't get listened to very much because people can't understand them. I've already talked about putting music in a key that the average person can sing. So what's wrong with playing music that the average person can understand as well? I think there is certainly a place for music like this in the worship service. And let me close as always by saying thank you for watching.